Happy Friday. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to our LFG Live. This is our last session in February, which is our People and Leadership series. As you guys hopefully remember, January was Foundation and Clarity, those clarifying moments, the foundation of the business, People and Leadership for February. And then next month, I'm taking a glance to make sure I'm not incorrect, but next month, yes, we have hiring and team structure, something that is so fundamentally important in how we do things. You've heard me talk about it in a few other sessions before, but going to get a little more granular in the right hiring and team structure. But for today, our final session on people and leadership. Um, Today, we're going to talk about leadership mistakes that cost you money. Not what anybody wants to do, right? Lose any money, especially when it's within their own power to control it. So businesses are complex. There are a lot of things that are going to help you make money, a lot of things that are going to cost you money. What we try to uncover, of course, is how to avoid some of the mistakes that we can make or some of the easily avoidable mistakes that'll encourage that money loss. So we're really going to talk about 5 things today. Now, I'm not going to try to say that business is that easy, that we only have 5 things that we can do that'll cost us money. But I am going to talk about 5 of those today. First, though, of course, I'm going to talk about what afternoon tea I'm drinking. Mine's actually a little cold right now. I didn't get to make a fresh cup, but I am drinking something simple, a maple espresso tea from Trader Joe's. Again, I usually like my bougie fancy tea, but today, just drinking this. It is fantastic. Cheers. And then we're going to talk about 5 specific mistakes this week. First is avoiding conversations. You've heard me talk about it a few times. We're going to go over it again a little today. Second, big one for me, promoting the wrong people. Love this one. Third, no scoreboard. I call it managing by vibes, managing by a feel. Not going to work. 4, being the bottleneck. The leader, owner, founder being the bottleneck in the business. And 5th, letting your culture drift. The foundations and fundamentals of who you are, letting those change over time because we're too busy, too distracted, whatever it may be. So those are the big 5 that we're going to talk about today. And of course, there are more, right? Every business is going to be different. When I dig into businesses, when they call me for help, there could be these 5 specifically. There could be a combination. There could be none of these. There are so many things that can factor into each business. So we do a customized overview, of course, when we speak, but those are the 5 we're going to talk about today. So first one, I know I did already talk about this in performance improvement planning and a few other items, but avoiding the hard conversations. They say that avoiding a hard conversation is like paying a tax, right? You're making all this money, now you got to pay a little bit back. Avoiding the hard conversations sometimes are done because we're just not confident in our leadership. Sometimes it's done because the person on the other end of those hard conversations is actually a really nice person, and that's hard to do, right? But when you don't have those conversations, what does that cost you as a business? And that's going to be the theme there. What is it costing you? It's costing rework. Everybody on this call should be looking at their P&L frequently. They should be looking at management reports throughout the month, but looking at a P&L at the close of a month, the close of a quarter, close of a year, and seeing what their labor rates are, what their costs of labor are, and what that labor rate is in comparison to their top line of revenue, right? And I can't tell you right now what your labor rate should be. It's honestly going to be so different. I look at some retail businesses where the labor rate is going to be a little bit lower. I look at, for example, a digital marketing business. I've talked about the amazing company I just previously worked with. Digital marketing, that's going to be a little bit higher. So I can't tell you what your labor rate should be, but it should be something you're looking at. But think about rework. So now let's say I'm just going to throw out a random number and you're used to a 20% labor rate, but half the time you have to redo the work. Well, now you're up to 30%. You've increased your labor rate. You're spending more money on labor because we have to do the same work again because we're not having the clarifying conversations with people on what you expect their work to look like. So avoiding that hard conversation, that tough conversation as we call it, which I do teach people how to make sure it's not as tough, but more of a corrective and encouraging, not being mean and yelling at people. But that rework is going to cost you a ton of money. The other is going to be resentment. We all know a happy employee, an employee who feels motivated, who feels part of the business, is going to be more productive. They're going to work harder. They're going to work faster. They're going to work smarter. They're going to be more involved, right? If they're resenting you, resenting your processes, resenting your company, do you think that same work ethic is going to come out? It is not, and that's going to cost you money. Now, that same employee who used to work at 100% capacity, maybe you're getting 75%. Even worse, maybe you're only getting 50% out of some of those, depending on the situation. So that resentment, based on not having those hard conversations, them not understanding the expectations, that's going to be terrible. Turnover. One of the things I look at in businesses is how much it costs to bring on a new employee. I've worked with some that we estimated the cost $3,000 to $5,000. Some we've estimated the cost higher, $10,000, just to bring on a new person. Turnover costs money. Think about that new hire you have to bring on. They could be the best person in the world. It still takes time to ramp that person up. You're missing productivity during that time. Not to mention the recruiting, the interviewing, training, onboarding, paperwork, all these things that have to happen, all cost money. So avoiding those hard conversations, losing employees and having turnover, all cost money. Big one, lost customers, right? Avoiding hard conversations with people means our quality of business, again, is going to go down. Customers are going to be unhappy. They're going to leave. They're not going to be happy with what you're doing. And then a huge one that may not be as easy to quantify in dollars and cents when we talk about avoiding conversations, your energy, your mental stability and your energy. How hard is it at the end of a day when you've seen employees unhappy, somebody quit, you had to redo this work, a client's unhappy because the deliverables weren't there on time or they weren't to the quality they expect. All of these things could be avoided if we have what we call those hard conversations. I just say they're accountability conversations, but this is costing you money. If we are not having those accountability conversations and those hard conversations, it is costing you money again through rework. The resentment the employees feel so their quality goes down, employee turnover, all these things, and again, your mental state. So I have seen in the past, and this kind of goes along with our mistake number 2 as well, but I have seen in the past, leaders keep employees in a role for too long because they weren't a right fit, but they kept them in for too long because they were a nice employee, because they were a loyal employee, maybe they were a long-term employee, they were somebody who worked hard and wanted to do the right thing, but they just weren't right for the role. Some people call it, one of my previous supervisors who I've worked with for a very long time, called it the right seat on the bus. Are they not on the right seat on the bus? And if they are on the right seat, if they are not on the right seat of the bus, you need to make sure you're moving them off the bus or ultimately out of the company. If they're just not right for any seat on your bus, regardless of how nice they are. And that sounds a little counterintuitive to some of the things I talked about with being a people first leader. But let's always make sure we're not confusing. People first leader does not mean we're only focusing on the people without the good of the company being in the forefront. If that person is not good for the company, they may not be able to be here. Now, I have had people I've had that situation with where they were great people, not great for the role. I've let them go and I helped them find a new job. I did a resume review for them. I made sure I wrote them a letter of recommendation. I put on paper. I gave them a recommendation on LinkedIn. I gave them some tips and tricks on how to find a new job. Like I really cared for them as a human, but they just weren't right for our business. But on the flip side of that, right, let's say you do have the right person there, but we're not having those hard conversations, they still might fail because they're not sure what right looks like. So what we really need to do is make sure when we have those people there that it's the right person in the right seat. We're giving them the tools necessary to be successful, removing the obstacles, and being truly kind to them. And truly kind is providing clarity, not avoiding those tough conversations. Avoiding them is expensive. Second, promoting the wrong people. This was prevalent in the sales world. Absolutely huge in the sales world. It was more common to promote the wrong person than promoting the right for a long time. For a long time in what I've seen. Because what I would see is we'd have this amazing salesperson, top seller in the whole company, doing an amazing job, or top seller in the district, loyal employee, great employee, beloved, long tenure. Well, now we want to promote him as store manager. That's two different jobs. You're taking this person that was amazing at one job and putting him in another job. That doesn't always translate. And I'm not saying it doesn't. We had some great people that were promoted. We even had some people we used to call the manager makers because they would take our salespeople and train them and coach them and guide them so much to make them amazing managers, and that's fine. But that's not always the case. And I think back to in my North Plainfield location, once I had this young lady, again, amazing. I loved working with her. She was just funny. She got along with the customers great, even when she was a little sassy with them. And she's like, Daria, I don't get it. I'm your top salesperson, and I want to be a manager, and I'm not yet. And I knew her. I knew her well because I worked in the store a lot because it was one of our busiest. And I knew she wasn't ready. I knew she could be. I knew she wasn't ready yet. So I told her, look, and I explained it to her. I said, and I know it's hard to believe me, that I don't think you're quite ready. But what I will commit to is I will personally work with you to get you to that next level. I will make sure you have all the people surrounding you who will help you get to that next level because I want you to be a leader. I want you to grow in the company. You're just not ready today. And what I don't want to do is see you go from my top salesperson to my worst manager because we didn't get you ready. And she was upset. She was bummed. Let's be realistic. She's not just going to go, yeah, Daria, that's great. Thank you so much. She was upset. So I said, look, one of my other locations doesn't have a manager right now, and somebody's not starting for another 2 or 3 weeks. I said, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I'm going to ask you to go to that store 2-3 weeks as the manager, as the acting manager, because I want you to kind of try it on. And I'm going to be here to guide you. I'm going to be here every step of the way so you don't miss something, but I want you to go kind of see what it feels like. And less than a week in, she called me and said, you were right. Now, I'm not telling this story because I like to be right. I'm telling this story because that's how common it was for people to just be promoted. And most people would have caved under that pressure. Most people would have said, oh my gosh, she's my top person. I got to move her. I got to give her what she wants. And I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I didn't want to see her fail. So again, what's going to cost you money? Promoting the wrong person. So in this case, we didn't get to see what the wrong person would have looked like because she did say she wanted to take some time. But in other cases, what we saw were power struggles, were people thinking the exact same skills were going to translate. Remembering, a manager is a people leader. A salesperson sells, right? And they build a relationship with their clients for sure, but it's not the same thing. And when they're not doing that right, you have this environment now of people who resent that person that's now their manager because they're not doing it well. And then they're getting arrogant about it. I'm the number one person in this company. I'm the number one person. Well, you're not anymore because you're not the number one manager. You're the number one salesperson. So make sure that we're doing it the right way. Otherwise, we're going to lose productivity. They're not ready for that role. Make sure they're going to lose team morale, as we said. You're going to lose quality. You're going to have a store that potentially used to have a good store manager, now has a store manager that's, or whatever the next role is, it's just not ready for it. And you're going to lose a lot of your own time. You're going to get a lot of calls from that person that was ill prepared for that promotion. You're going to get a lot of calls from their direct reports. You're likely going to get some calls from their manager or their supervisor kind of venting, and none of that is going to be productive. So while it seems like it would take more time to do it the right way, it actually takes more time and more frustration to do it the wrong way. Because yes, they both do take time, but one is in a very positive way, one is in a very negative and reactive way. So make sure that rather than doing that, promoting too quickly, we're coaching, we're guiding. If your organization is big enough, have a training team, have a coaching team. I know not everybody is. That's why consulting companies exist, right? For those who can't bring on full-time folks. But make sure we have all that in place. Okay. Mistake 3, called managing by vibes, which does happen in a lot of smaller companies, and kind of going by gut instinct. And I have found in some cases people's gut instinct to be dead on and amazing and very good, but I still like data. But I've had others in the past that not be. I've had people say, I feel like in our call center, our call volume is down. Well, I looked at the numbers in it and it wasn't. It was up, or vice versa. Or I feel like our sales are down. Well, why do you feel that? Well, I feel slower. And I look and the sales are up. And what was happening in some of those cases could be a variety of things. Right? I'm working with a lot of businesses, but the one I actually thought of off the top of my head as I just said that, where they thought they were slower, but they were actually doing more profit, was because the people in the processes were better. They got better people. They became more tenured, therefore more trained, therefore better at what they were doing. Their processes became more streamlined. So there wasn't a lot of rushing, and it wasn't a lot of panicking, and it wasn't a lot of jerking around and all this. Things were just running smoothly. So because things were running so smoothly, they felt like they were slower because they were handling things better. They were handling them more quickly. So at that point, you're either going to have a smoother runway of your work, right? Or you can add more work, depending on what the nature of that business is and what their goals are. But managing by vibes doesn't work. It doesn't give you actionable items to be able to coach your people, to give them feedback that they require, that they want and need to be able to do better. And what does that cost you? We have to keep bringing this back to cost, right? If you're managing by vibes and not by a scorecard, you're going to see leaders manage to who they like most, what their moods are for the day, what the most recent mistakes were versus an overall picture of the business, right? It's you made a mistake last week, therefore you are the person who makes mistakes. That's not data. That's a gut feeling. And what it's going to cost you is inconsistent performance. You're not going to be able to drive the numbers. You're not going to be able to set KPI goals. You're not going to be able to move your business to the next level because you don't know what the first level even was, right? There's going to be some unfairness in there too. If you're managing by vibes, and you're going to tend to manage differently the people that you like more, maybe you have a personal relationship with or just connect with differently than those you don't. And I have to put my little HR hat on for a little bit. That opens you up to a lot of lawsuits. And when I talk about cost, that is a huge cost. That is a big one we want to absolutely avoid. Unfairness, whether it's real or perceived. If you don't have data backing it up, you could be managing completely clear across the board the same way, but without data, without backup, even that perceived unfairness is going to cost those same things. It's going to cost the lack of performance. It's going to cost, again, not being able to drive KPIs and being able to move things up. So let's make sure we have some KPIs in place. We have measurables in place, and we're not losing money by or increasing costs in our business by that inconsistent performance and not moving us to the next level. Okay? And again, each company is going to have different KPIs. They are going to be different across the board. Certain things are going to be similar, right? Employee performance based on what the goal of your business is, but everything is going to be a little different, whether it's a home service-based business, whether it's a retail environment, a call center. I've had experience with all of these, but they're all going to be incredibly different. So fourth mistake we're going to talk about today, owners or CEOs, founders, however we want to phrase this, being the bottleneck. And the reason we hear that is because nobody can do this like me. Nobody can do this like me. I built this business myself, and this business is successful because I did what I did. And you're right. You're right. You're great. And chances are it's going to be a little bit of a struggle to find people that are as good as you, but it can happen. And that's what we have to try to keep doing, the higher, better than our best. But if you're doing it that way and you're the bottleneck and nobody can do it as good as you, so you don't let anybody else do it, you can't grow. You cannot scale. And you guys all know when I talk about growth, when I talk about scale, it doesn't necessarily mean growing the business from a quantity perspective, going from 1 store to 2 stores, or 2 to 4, or 10 to 15. It doesn't mean going from a 5,000 square foot building to a 10,000. Sometimes it just means scaling up, meaning bringing in more revenue, driving costs down, being more productive. That's still scaling up and growth in my book, whether it's size or just quality or both at any point. But if you hold on to that idea that nobody can do it like me, so therefore I must do it, you're not ready to grow. You're still going to be that owner operated thing. And what it costs you at that point is very slow decision-making time. You can't be available for everyone and everything. I had this happen again at one of the great companies I worked with recently, where the owner was really the head salesperson. He was absolutely amazing at it. And when we needed to reach out to him for a decision or for help or for approval on something, it was challenging because literally his calendar was back to back to back to back. So if we needed a decision from him, we likely had to wait till after regular business hours where his calendar was clear to get a decision back. Well, if we're trying to grow the business and we're trying to increase our client count and our productivity counts, how are we going to do that if that's the approval process? So we were actually losing sales, losing money because of that slow decision-making time. There's also going to be missed opportunities based on that same thing, and that team dependency, right? In a great organization, our folks are going to be able to make a certain amount of decisions on their own. Not every, certain scale, certain impact, and certain cost. Of course, we would want an approval process, but there has to be some ability for people to make decisions on their own. We bring on these great people. We need them to be able to do their job. And if you are going to be the bottleneck in that and they can't do their job, not only are you not utilizing them to the full capacity of what you hired them for, you are not allowing them to use their brain in their decision-making processes. You're slowing them down and decreasing their employee satisfaction at the same time. And then at the end of it all, you're burnout. You know, I think I mentioned this back in January under the Foundation series, but I had an owner who was proud that he hadn't had a vacation in years. Baffled me. Now, I understand hard work. I understand rolling your sleeves up, getting the job done. I 100% do, but I don't agree with burnout, and I don't see burnout as a badge of honor. Now, I know that sometimes, especially in the first year, second year, it's harder to walk away from the business. In growing phases, it's harder to walk away, but you have to get to that point in a growing business where you can step away for a couple of days, not sweat, not panic, maybe worry a little bit. I get it. Maybe check your phone a little. I totally understand that. But you can't allow yourself to get to a point of burnout, because then you're not the good one anymore. You are not the one who's going to be able to close every sale. You're just going to be tired, and that's going to show. That's going to show in your work quality. It's going to show in your leadership, and that's going to cost you a lot of money. Okay? Some of the things, too, that I've seen with partners do with that decision-making thing is either a number scale, a price scale, or a color-coded scale. I had one say, hey, if anything is over $500, you need to follow this approval process. Over $2,000, this approval process. Anything under $500, you could do on your own. It doesn't matter. I've had other just label some of the things red, green, yellow. So it really depends on what's going to work best for your organization and your budgeting. And then the last one, a little tougher from a metric standpoint, but hugely impactful for the impact of your business. And mistake number 5 is letting your culture drift. If you are at a point of growing or scaling your business, which is why you're with me today, you likely have a good culture, good or great culture. You should know the answer to that. You should already know if you have a good, great, or not great culture. But if you're at the point where I hope you are, you have a good or great culture. When we allow that to shift to a point where even you're not sure you like showing up to work in the morning, where you have that anxiety the night before in the morning going, it's going to be another one of those days. Now, we all have those. Even in the best of companies that I've worked with, we all have those days. Shouldn't be a consistent feeling, right? When that culture starts to shift, that's when owners start to scratch their head and go, everything, it was working. I don't get it. Why is this not working anymore? And it's because we let that culture shift. And if I can't find it within like 2 seconds, I'll give it up. Oh, but it was one of these John Gordon books I've read that actually talked about it a little bit too. Difficult conversations don't have to be difficult. Very, very short read, very good read. It's read in more of the like storytelling fashion. But what I loved about that book is it's called Difficult Conversations Don't Have to Be Difficult. It's literally talking about having difficult conversations. But it also talked about the culture and how somebody was a little baffled at how they had an amazing culture at one point and then the culture dipped and why. And it came back to a lot of those conversations. This will happen when standards aren't reinforced, when you're too busy to say, this is how we do our business, this is how we run our business, and that's it. Or people who join the business, new hires, aren't onboarded properly. They don't know what right looks like, right? When managers don't have those tough conversations, those accountability conversations, and they tolerate, nonsense and shenanigans where they shouldn't. When you stop talking about your core values and your mission and vision in the company, I believe that's something that should be reinforced consistently. And what is that going to cost you when we don't do these things? Turnover, customer experience. Hiring is going to become a lot harder. You're going to get a bad reputation for it. If you're a certain size company, you may even have some bad employee reviews on Glassdoor or LinkedIn, and your brand gets messy. There's no pride or honor behind it. So what we have to make sure that we're doing to reduce those costs is have things built into your culture and your company that are non-negotiable. Now, again, every company could be different, as I say often, but think of shout outs. Think of employee of the week, which I know is impossible for some smaller companies, but maybe employee of the month, employee of the quarter. And one thing I did to keep culture alive as the company was growing, any company I was in was growing, is I always had cards that I would get printed with our company logo on the front. And one of my former coworkers, Simon, used to do some really cool designs for me, but the inside was blank. And I actually have a little ink pen and a wax seal thing on my desk. I still have it now. You'll see different colors of the different companies that I've worked with. And I actually have a drawer next to me of all my little ink seals. And I would get either the logo of the company on that ink, on that stamper, or my initials. And if somebody did something great, if they were employee of the month, or maybe they were top seller that month, or maybe they completed a training course, or maybe I found out that they just bought a new house or they bought a new car, they did something great in their personal life, I would handwrite them a card. And although that may seem silly, I still have people now that reference back to when they received a handwritten card from me, where I would be on a call. And remember, at one company I worked with where I started doing this, we had over 4,000 employees. So I didn't get to see everybody all the time. And most of these people I hadn't even met in person, unfortunately. But if I was on a call or something with them, they'd point behind them and go, oh, look, I have your card up on my board here. And I wrote that 6-8 months ago, and you still have it there. That was culture. Our CEO in that same company, when new hires would come on board, we'd have training classes, which were done virtually because we were all over the country. He would make it a point as the CEO of this giant company to jump on those virtual calls once for every new hire training session. It could be 10 minutes, could be 20, to greet them all, to get to know them. And he would remember their names, and he would talk to them like they were people, like actual people, not just, hi, I'm so-and-so, good luck and welcome. He would actually get to know them a little bit. That's what built the culture. And then it's reinforcing that. Our people knew what right looked like, and they knew what we would tolerate, and they moved swiftly. That kept the culture alive. So if we're not doing those things and that culture starts to diminish, you'll see quality diminish. That costs money. You'll see employee turnover go up. You'll see employee satisfaction go down. All these things are going to cost money. Culture is absolutely a huge one, and one I love kind of engaging and talking about. So again, ton of mistakes that can cost you money in leadership. But the 5 we talked about today: avoiding those tough conversations, accountability conversations, promoting the wrong people, no scoreboard, managing by just vibes, the leader being the bottleneck in the business, and letting your culture dip, letting your culture drift away from where it was when you became successful. So all these things, not going to help. I can help if you need any help in isolating those and how we can help your business really thrive and making sure the leadership mistakes aren't what's costing your business. But I encourage you all to step back at some point today, maybe when you're driving or drinking your coffee in the morning. Which mistake have you made the most? And what did it cost you? Which mistake do you think you've made the most? Now, we all make mistakes in leadership. None of us are perfect. But which do you think you've made the most? And what did that cost you when you really think about it? Do you have scorecards for all your different roles in writing, like measurable? That's another one. And if you're the leader of the business, if you're CEO, owner, founder, are you the bottleneck? Do you find yourself being the bottleneck? Definitely some things to think about and how to make sure that we're reducing that leadership expense in the business and cost to the business. But as always, LeMay Fusion Group is here. If you do have any questions, want an evaluation, want to talk about how we can help your business, or just some ideas, certainly reach out through email, through phone, through our website, LeMayFusionGroup.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, of course. And again, next month, I'll put our calendar up, but we are going to go into hiring and team structure. When is the right time to hire? The true cost of a bad hire, which that goes back to some of our conversations today, of course, hiring for skill versus values, and onboarding as a growth strategy. So those are for next month. For now, team, though, thank you again for joining me on this Friday afternoon. Finish your drink, take a deep breath, and go lead with intention today. Thanks, everyone.